I poured every ounce of my savings, every bit of energy, and every ounce of hope into building a small guest house behind my parents' home, believing with all my heart that it was meant for me. I spent over a year planning it, designing every corner, and imagining the day I'd finally have a place to call my own. But the moment the final nail was hammered in and the paint dried, my dad handed me my bags and said the words that shattered me. "Your sister needs it more than you." I stood there frozen, gripping the handles of my suitcases, realizing that everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, was gone. I didn't yell or cry. I just walked away. A week later, their frantic calls began, and that's when everything changed. Even now, it still doesn't feel real. I keep replaying those moments in my head, trying to make sense of them. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't careless. I had done everything the right way, worked hard, saved diligently, followed every rule. When I finally accepted that buying a house of my own was out of reach, it was my parents who came up with the idea. Build a small guest house in the backyard. It'll be yours forever. I remember my mom's soft, convincing tone when she said that. "This is your future, sweetheart. You'll always have a place to call home." I believed her. I wanted to believe her. So I threw myself into the project completely. Every dollar I had, years of savings, every bonus check, every overtime shift, went into that little house. I worked alongside the contractors, picking tiles, painting walls, choosing light fixtures that made it feel warm and inviting. I even planted lavender outside the front porch because I wanted it to smell peaceful. That house wasn't just a building to me. It was my safe haven. When construction was finally done, I stood on the porch, breathing in the scent of fresh paint and newly cut wood, ready to move in. I remember holding my breath, waiting for that sense of finally. But instead, my dad came out of the main house, not with a key, but with my luggage. "Your sister needs it more than you," he said flatly, like he was announcing the weather. I just stared at him, certain I'd misheard. My sister Lisa? The same sister who'd flitted from one failed job to another, who couldn't save a dime to her name, who always somehow needed rescuing. Surely he was joking, but when I looked at his face, I knew he wasn't. "What?" I managed to whisper. "Dad, I built this. With my money," he shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "Lisa's been through a lot. She needs a fresh start." I turned to Mom, desperate for her to correct him, to step in. But she only gave me this tired, patronizing smile. "You're young, Emily. No husband, no kids. You'll be fine. Your sister really needs this more right now." Her tone was so casual, so unbothered that it made me feel sick. "You promised," I said, my voice trembling, my throat tightening as the words came out. Mom sighed like I was being dramatic. "It's still part of the family, sweetheart. We all share. Don't be selfish." And that was it. The final push that made everything inside me go numb. I looked over at Lisa, standing smugly by the new front door. My door. And she had the nerve to smirk. "I mean, it's not like you were paying rent," she said, as if that excused everything. For a moment, I thought I might actually laugh. The absurdity of it all was too much. I paid for the foundation, the permits, the furniture, even the stupid welcome mat. And yet, somehow they were acting like I was the unreasonable one for wanting to live there. I wanted to scream, to demand they give it back, but one look at their faces told me the truth. They'd decided this long ago. They never planned to let me have it. They just needed my money. So I picked up my bags and left. No fight. No argument, just silence. I walked away from the house I'd built with my own hands. I remember hearing my mom call my name once, maybe twice, but I didn't turn back. I didn't owe them anything anymore. The silence afterward was almost peaceful. For the first few days, there were no calls, no texts. I think they expected me to come crawling back, to beg for forgiveness, to understand like I always did. But I didn't call. I didn't text. I just disappeared. Because deep down, I knew something they didn't. And that's what made me wait. See, at the end of construction, when everything was almost done, my dad decided to save money. He replaced my licensed electrician and plumber with one of his old buddies, a man with no certifications, who claimed he could wrap up the loose ends for half the price. I told him it was a bad idea. I told him corners would get cut. He'd laughed, clapping me on the shoulder. "Emily, you worry too much. My guy knows what he's doing. Why waste more money?" I wanted to argue more, but I let it go. After all, I was supposed to be the one living there. If something went wrong, I'd handle it myself. But then I wasn't the one living there anymore, was I? A week later, the calls started. First Mom, then Lisa, then Dad. I ignored all of them. By the time I checked my phone, there were 7 missed calls and 2 voicemails. The first was from Mom, her tone sharp and irritated, not remorseful. "Emily, I don't know if you did something or if you knew something, but the guest house has serious problems. The plumbing's leaking, the power keeps cutting out, and there's this awful smell coming from somewhere inside. Your sister can't even move in yet. We need to talk." I played it twice, then set my phone down. I hadn't done anything to that house. I hadn't sabotaged a thing. The only thing I had done was leave. And the moment I walked away, the whole thing, like the relationship with my family, began to crumble. They'd cut corners to save money. They'd betrayed me without a thought, and now they were paying for it. But I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel angry anymore. Just empty. Because this wasn't about plumbing or money or faulty wiring. It was about years, decades, of being second place. I had spent my entire life trying to prove I was worth loving, worth keeping, worth choosing. And every single time, they'd chosen her instead. When we were kids, Lisa was always the favorite. If we argued, I was to blame. If she broke something, I was the one punished. When she lost things, I was sent to replace them. When she lied, they believed her. Always. I thought things would change when we grew up, that maybe finally I'd earned their respect. But standing outside that house, the one I built with my own money and my own sweat, I realized it was never about fairness. It was about loyalty. And theirs had never belonged to me. So when the phone rang again, I almost didn't answer, but I did. It was Dad this time. His voice was tight, impatient. "Emily, what's going on with the house?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean," he said, his tone dropping low. "Lisa can't even move in. The plumbing's shot. There's water in the walls. The electricity's failing. And now the whole place smells like mildew. What happened?" I exhaled slowly. "Sounds like you should call a contractor." There was a pause on the line, the sound of him realizing that for once, I wasn't going to fix their mistake. And that silence was the most peaceful sound I'd ever heard. "If something happened, you need to tell me now. Did you leave something unfinished? Did you mess something up?" I clenched my jaw. "I didn't do anything, Dad. You're the one who hired that cheap contractor against my advice. Maybe you should call him." Another pause. He wasn't expecting me to stand my ground. "Emily, you know, we don't have the money to fix this right now." There was their reason he was calling. My parents thought they could get me to come back and clean up their mess. I closed my AS. "I'm sorry, Dad, but this isn't my responsibility." Silence. Then came the anger. "Emily, don't act like this." I didn't respond. "You can't just walk away from your family," he snapped, voice rising. "We raised you. We gave you everything." I let out a slow breath, fingers tightening around the phone. "No, Dad, I gave you everything, and I'm done." I ended the call. For the next several days, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls from my mom, my dad, even Lisa. Some were furious, shouting demands. Others tried guilt, pretending to be concerned for me. I ignored every one of them. But then the tone shifted. I began receiving texts from other relatives. At first, it was a couple of cousins just checking in, asking if I was okay. Then an aunt, then an uncle, and finally my grandmother. "Emily, sweetheart," she wrote. "Your mom says you abandoned them and left the house half finished. What's really going on?" I closed my eyes. They were trying to poison the well. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about pride. They didn't want to admit to anyone that the home they'd taken from me was falling apart. They needed a scapegoat. My anger rose like a tide, but I stayed calm. This was exactly what they wanted. A reaction, a return, someone to come fix their mess. But that wasn't going to happen. Because now, finally, the truth was beginning to break through. And for once, I wasn't the one left holding the blame. I didn't respond to my grandmother right away. I knew exactly what was unfolding. My parents were rushing to rewrite the story before I could speak. They weren't just reaching out to me anymore. They were reaching everyone else, making sure their version got there first. I could picture their narrative perfectly. Emily walked out after everything we did for her. We'll either stay in the house rentrée. She threw a tantrum over nothing and left the place a wreck. We gave her everything, and she paid us back with silence. None of it mentioned that I had funded the entire build, or that I'd poured my time, energy, and savings into making that guest house livable. None of that fit their story, because in their version, I was always the selfish one, the ungrateful child. And the worst part, I knew some people would believe them. That's how it had always been. They'd twist the truth until it suited them perfectly. But I wasn't going to play their game anymore. So I let the calls ring out. I let the text pile up. I didn't engage, didn't explain. I watched the screen fill with missed notifications. Then after a few days, the tone of the messages changed. The relatives who once sounded concerned now sounded different, less certain, more questioning. Something was shifting. And I had a pretty good idea why. It wasn't just that my parents were losing their grip on me. They were starting to lose their grip on the house too, the one they took from me. It began with a text from my aunt. "Emily, honey, I heard the guest house is unlivable. Someone said mold is spreading in there. Is that true?" I stared at her message, heart slowing. That wasn't something my parents had mentioned in their angry voicemails. They talked about plumbing issues, electrical problems, but mold. And if mold was spreading, that meant it wasn't minor. It was serious. Another message buzzed in, this time from my cousin. "Hey, random question. Is it true your parents don't have the money to fix the guest house?" I heard Lisa's fiancé's pissed because they expected to move in by now. I swallowed hard. I had a feeling my parents were in trouble. They'd assumed I would come back to fix everything, that I would feel guilty or desperate enough to be accepted again, that I'd just do what they wanted, but I didn't. No. Now they were stuck with a completely unlivable house that was falling apart faster than they could cover it up. And the best part, they had promised it to Lisa and her fiancé, which meant that for the first time, my sister was turning against them too. I knew it was only a matter of time before Lisa called, and when she did, she didn't even try to hide her frustration. "Emily, what the hell is wrong with that house?" She snapped the moment I picked up. I almost laughed. "Why are you asking me?" I said calmly. Because she huffed. "Dad said you handled everything, that you worked with the contractors, that you made sure everything was done right." I did. I cut in right up. Until Dad decided to cut corners and hire his own guy to finish things off. "Maybe you should ask him silence." Then more hesitantly, he said, "It's your fault the permits aren't going through." I raised an eyebrow. "What permits?" Lisa let out a frustrated breath. "Theoni's for the plumbing and electricity. They said you didn't file the final paperwork, and now the city won't approve occupancy." I blinked. Then I actually laughed because that was when I realized my parents had played themselves. They had always assumed it would be living there, that I would be the one dealing with city inspections, handling the last few approvals. But the second they kicked me out, they had also kicked out the only person who knew how to finish the job legally, and now Thessity wasn't letting. Then move anyone in. "That's not my problem, Lisa," I said, voice calm. She let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You think you're so smug, don't you?" "No," I said honestly. "I just think you and Dad should have thought things through before stealing my house." "Oh my God, Emily, stop being so dramatic," she snapped. "You didn't even pay for a single thing, Lisa. Not rent, not repairs, nothing. I paid for the entire house." Silence. A long, painful silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, the realization sinking in. She knew I was right. She knew that if the roles were reversed, if she had built something with her own money only to have it taken away, she would have lost her mind. But she couldn't admit it. So instead, she did what she always did. She lashed out. "Well, Mom and Dad are telling everyone that you abandoned them," she said coldly. "That you left a mess behind. You should probably know that people are talking." I didn't react. She was trying to scare him, trying to guilt me into coming back and cleaning up their mess. "Then let them talk," I said simply. Lisa let out a breath, frustrated. "God, you're so selfish. Goodbye." Lisa and I hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling something strange because I knew what was coming next. The more my parents lied, the more people would start asking questions, and they wouldn't like the answers they had. spent years painting me as the responsible one, the one who handled things, helped out, kept the family running. Now they were suddenly trying to make me the villain, and people were going to notice the inconsistencies. I wasn't going to fight them. I wasn't going to explain myself. I didn't need to because the truth always comes out. And for once, I wasn't the one who had anything to lose. I didn't hear from Lisa after that call, not for a few days at least. But I knew that didn't mean things had settled down. If anything, it meant things were getting worse. My parents and sister weren't the type to accept consequences. Quietly. If Lisa had gone silent, it was only because she was scrambling behind the scenes trying to find a way to fix things without admitting they messed up. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of reaching out first, and then just as I expected, the call started again. First from a random uncle I barely spoke to, then from an older cousin who lived out of state, then finally from my grandmother. That's when I knew things had escalated because my grandmother was the last person my parents would have wanted involved. She wasn't the type to blindly take their side. She was sharp, no nonsense, and didn't fall for guilt trips. She was calling me. It meant she had heard the whole story, or at least their version of it. I picked up Emily, sweetheart, she said, her voice warm but firm. I just had a very interesting conversation with your mother, I smiled to myself. Let me guess. I said she told you I abandoned them and left a disaster behind. Something like that, my grandmother said. I could hear the skepticism in her tone. But I've known you a long time, and that didn't sound quite right to me. I exhaled slowly. What did she say? That you stormed off over a silly misunderstanding, left the guest house unfinished, and now your poor sister and her fiancé have nowhere to live. And of course she and your father are heartbroken that you've turned. You're back on the family. I let out a short laugh. Did she mention that I paid for the entire house? There was a pause, then dryly. No, I don't believe she did. Of course she didn't. So what really happened? My grandmother asked. And for the first time, I told someone the full truth. I told her how my parents had encouraged me to build the guest house, promising it would be mine. How I had used my own savings and spent months managing the construction, picking out materials, making sure everything was perfect. And then the moment it was finished, they gave it away to Lisa. My grandmother didn't interrupt me. Once she just listened, and when I was done, she let out a slow, measured breath. That's low, she finally said. Yeah, I muttered. And let me guess, she continued. They expected you to come crawling back the moment things started falling apart. Bingo. There was a pause. Then she said something. I wasn't expecting you should come to Sunday dinner. I blinked. What, everyone's going to be there, she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. I think it's time you let everyone hear your side, Grandma said. I paused. It wasn't that I feared my parents. I was long past needing their approval. But confronting them in front of the whole family, that was a whole different story. Grandma, I'm not sure I want to, I admitted. I'm not telling you to make a scene, she cut in. I'm just saying let them dig their own grave. I thought about that and slowly a small smile crept across my face. All right, I said, I'll come. Sunday dinner. I showed up 10 minutes late intentionally. The second I stepped through the door, I felt the change in atmosphere. People had clearly heard rumors. Some gave me curious glances, others shifted uncomfortably. Then there were the few, my aunt, a couple of cousins, who gave subtle nods like they were already in on the truth. Lisa sat stiffly beside our parents, arms tightly crossed. She didn't look at me. My mom forced a cheerful tone. Oh, Emily, you actually came. Yeah, I replied, settling into an empty chair. I didn't add. Surprising, isn't it? But it was implied. Dinner began with stiff conversation, the kind where tension crackled beneath every word. It was so thick you could slice it with a knife. And then, right as we were wrapping up the meal, my grandmother, bless her, put down her glass and turned to Lisa. So Lisa, she said, how's the new house coming along? The room went silent. Lisa's jaw clenched. We're still dealing with a few problems, she muttered. My dad jumped in quickly. Oh, nothing serious, he said with a chuckle. Grandma raised her brows. What sort of problems? Lisa gave him a sharp look, but my dad cleared his throat and replied. Just some plumbing issues, a few electrical glitches, really. Nothing big. Minor delays. I nearly laughed out loud. Minor delays. That's what they were calling it. Then Grandma turned to me. Emily, dear, she said, weren't you the one overseeing that construction? All eyes shifted toward me. I took a slow sip from my glass before setting it down. I was, I said calmly. Up until Dad decided to bring in a cheaper contractor behind my back to cut costs. I paused, then added with a shrug. I warned him it was a mistake, but hey, what do I know? The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa's cheeks flushed bright red. My mom's fake smile faltered. Dad looked like he wanted to explode. But they didn't say a word because they couldn't. They knew I was telling the truth. And now, so did everyone else. The whispers started quickly. My aunt leaned in, murmuring something to my cousin. My uncle shook his head and muttered, "Unbelievable." And just like that, they lost control of the narrative. No matter how many stories they spun, no matter how they tried to reshape the past, the damage was done. The truth had landed. I left that dinner feeling lighter than I had in months. There had been no shouting, no confrontation. I had simply spoken the truth, and that was enough. My parents didn't call me after that. Neither did Lisa. The silence wasteling. The fallout had settled, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was the one who lost.